as far as AEW, AEW seems to be on a positive trend here too, and I think what's happening, especially for AEW, is the longer it exists, and if we had Impact on this line, just because I spend so much time with this data, God, he's just putting himself over. Because I look at this data so much, if we had Impact on this graph, we would see, Impact. We see Impact get pretty high over time. Impact would probably peak at about where AEW is at now. And I think what happens in web search, and what I'm tempted to say is reflected in some form of reality as far as brand ID and brand recognition, is just the longer that this brand exists, and I think this is very relevant for WWE too. Just the longer that this brand exists, the more equity it has, the more. And name ID, I think, is very underrated and understood. The longer AEW exists, and you might want to make a note of this, Gull, because this is a great way to be an apologist for AEW. The longer that AEW exists, the more they will be able to be successful in a number of ways. In the case of WWE, they've done a lot to lose fans over the last 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. But during those 20 years, they were by far the dominant, and still are the dominant brand in wrestling by a far margin. By a gap that's that big right now, which is a gap of 4 times over AEW. That's just in the US. The gap is even bigger worldwide. But the longer your brand exists, without too much controversy, the longer that brand exists, the more recognizable it is. I think the easier it is to not only make consumer sales, but more importantly, to make business deals, including for TV rights. So I think that's got a lot to do with WWE's ability to grow their business-to-business revenues, and it's got a lot to do, I think, with why AEW will not have it as easy as WWE does for a very long time if they ever get there. And I think, even if AEW doesn't produce a better product than it currently regularly produces, even if AEW doesn't grow the next big star and have much stronger star power than they have now, just existing in a competent way creatively, or even in an incompetent way creatively, that goes a long way toward web search and therefore maybe other things. Because I think web search is just indicative of mind share. How much are you thinking about something? I think that's how much is the population thinking about something that's bared out in web search. Yeah. I think there was a point, for example, in, let's say, 2018 or 2019 where, and maybe just having some internet myopia here, there's a point in 2018, 2019 where I felt that Ring of Honor was a much stronger brand than Impact Wrestling. Especially, take 2018 when Impact was on, the Pursuit channel, right? Where basically nobody was watching it. Or maybe they were watching on Twitch. And Ring of Honor at least was still on Sinclair and was doing some interesting things with New Japan. And was actually touring and drawing multiple hundreds of people. Impact still can barely do that. Despite that, and despite whatever discrepancies their challenges Impact may still have, Impact way ahead of Ring of Honor and web search. Why? Because Impact existed on national, highly distributed television, and not just in the US, but in the UK, in India, and wherever else they're distributed for, 2005 and forward, or you start the clock at the pay-per-view era, 2002. Just existing persistently. You might lose a lot of money, but you're building up something that is of value. Anyway.